Hello, and welcome to a most excellent 80s movies podcast. It's the podcast where a filmmaker, a comedian, and a media scholar, professor, party their way through the 80s movies we think we love with these our modern eyes. Today, we are watching 16 Candles, a movie selection from 1984.
So, what's the story? You got a guy or?
Yes, 3 big ones, and they went blood.
Her name is Samantha Baker, and today is her 16th birthday.
Fred, she's gotten her boobies.
Oh, I'd better go get my magnifying glass.
They forgot my birthday. Classic. This is the single worst day of my entire life.
Universal Pictures presents
Score, like a rack hit.
16 Candles.
You say it's your birthday. It's my birthday too.
The story of a girl who's stuck with a guy who's driving her crazy.
Nice manners, babe.
And stuck on a guy she's crazy about.
Who's Jake?
Jake Ryan?
Jake's my boy.
Jake is a senior, and he's beautiful and perfect. He doesn't even know you exist. He smiles at me, and I don't say anything. Can't believe I'm such a jerk. You quit feeling sorry for yourself. It's bad for your complexion.
You know Samantha Baker? Kids are looking at me a lot. It's kind of cool the way she's always looking at me. Maybe she's retarded.
What's happening? The hot stuff?
His name is Long Duck Dong.
Nothing could shock me anymore.
Underpants.
Can I borrow your underpants for 10 minutes?
Girls' underpants.
Hate that rock and roll rubbish.
Everybody in this family has just gone totally out of limits.
You guys, you just gotta be cool. You just gotta chill out and just be cool. Just watch me.
Why, you don't have a scuzzbag.
I'll let you take Carolyn home. She's so blitz, she won't know the difference.
Jake, I don't have a car.
You can take mine.
I gotta get out of here before anything else terrible happens.
She's stuck between a half-wit
Very hot, very hot.
and a heartbreaker.
I want a serious girlfriend, somebody I can love, that's gonna love me back.
Pretty intense, huh? Over.
Everyone she knows is either on her case
You know you're the one I want to buy, huh?
or out of their tree.
Bonsai!
It only happens once in a lifetime,
This has got to be a joke.
and once is enough.
Happy birthday, Samantha.
This is getting good.
16 Candles.
Well, that's essentially the whole movie there. It's just all in the trailer, isn't it?
Good night, everyone.
I'm comedian Krissy Lenz, director of NCT Improv. And with me, as always, is...
Nathan Blackwell, filmmaker, and that's all I have in life. Shoot.
Aw. I mean, it's not nothing. And with us today is a guest I'm very excited about. She is Dr. Shaina Hammerman, media scholar and associate director of Jewish studies at Stanford University, and the author of Silver Screen Hasidic Jews, The Story of an Image. Hi, Shaina.
Hi, Krissy and Nathan.
Hey.
Shane is also one of my oldest and bestest friends, and we went through these high school days together. So pretty excited to be able to at least have that to talk about and relate about. Shaina, is this a movie that you watched a lot growing up?
I definitely watched this in, let's say, middle school and high school more than once. And I feel like we referred to it a lot in our own lives. It was important to us. But I think it's also really important to note that this movie came out in the early 80s when I was a preschooler. So it was already a kind of nostalgic experience to watch this movie and the other John Hughes movies that we also, I feel like, quoted and were familiar with. And one of our friends called herself Ducky from Pretty in Pink. There was a lot of in some ways, I think we were relating to Molly Ringwald's.
Yes. Being like Molly Ringwald is still the vibe I'm going for. Still aiming to be a 1980s Molly Ringwald. Yeah, and it was nostalgic, in the 90s as a teenager, especially as a teenage girl, to sort of look back at these Molly Ringwald 80s movies, Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, and this one, and try and like sort of make that your high school experience or compare it to your high school experience.
It's like one of those internet tests, like which John Hughes movie are you, or was your that you kind of gravitated towards? For me, it was always Ferris Bueller, which in some ways it always felt less personal than his other movies.
Yeah, and for me, like, I don't think it was ever 16 Candles. Of all of the movies, of all of John Hughes 80s Molly Ringwald movies that were in the rotation, this was not one of my favorites. It was definitely Pretty in Pink, Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller that had a higher rating in my mind.
For sure. The Breakfast Club kind of, it represented every single type that you could find in a high school, and put them all in a room together in this sort of fantasy friendship building way that was really that was striking. This movie gets lost. Our main character sort of gets lost halfway through, and it's hard to know who we're rooting for. We're always rooting for her, but who we're rooting for her to end up with, or what we really want as the outcome, is not always clear.
Yes. This movie gets lost in many ways.
This is John Hughes' first directorial debut. I think he wanted to do Breakfast Club first because it says it's a very kind of contained movie with just a couple of characters. But for one reason or another, this became his first directed feature. And I kind of see some of the some of the earlier forms of some of the stuff that he really nailed in Breakfast Club. And some of the stuff in here is like the storytelling and the characterization is some of it is strong right out of the gate, and some of it is still a little squiffy.
I think of all the things that this movie nails, the thing that I can relate to most is that teen girl, high school sophomore feeling of like literally no one cares about me. Everyone has forgotten me. Nobody knows I exist. And like nobody cares. Like I can relate to that, and that might be, and the grandparents being total weirdos. But that might be about where like the relatability ends for me.
I wrote down the unconditional love of grandparents. It must be shunned.
There's so much in this movie where she's just so full of desire. And I think it's desire that's the thing, and not the object of her desire. So does she actually want to have sex with Jake Ryan? Probably not. She's still pretty little, it seems, pretty young in her behavior and her view of sexuality. But it's almost like she desires to have sex with him, or she wants some kind of intimacy and closeness. She wants to be part of something. And that's the part that I really related to. Like she's so full of wanting, and she doesn't know how to get it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's not directed. She doesn't really know what it is that she wants. That's what she's working out.
Yeah.
Because Jake Ryan is nothing. He's like literally a blank. He's a blank. He's a handsome blank. That's the only. There's nothing.
How is he not Matt Dillon, by the way?
I know, right?
That's like that.
But there's nothing interesting about him except for that he's rich, white, and has a very square jaw and symmetrical face and a fancy car, and he's rich.
I think one of the things that John Hughes starts to work out in this movie, and then really makes it kind of like the centerpiece in The Breakfast Club, is that he takes some of these high school stereotypes and kind of subverts them, or makes it kind of like the character reveal. Like, I was not you're right. There's not much going on with not Matt Dillon. But he does a bit subvert the idea of being like the handsome hunk king of the prom who wants romance. He says, I just want a girl that I can love, and that's a subversion from all the other teen movies that this kind of heartthrob character is. Just like a lot of the characters are kind of subversions of what they're originally like the geek or like the princess, and that really becomes like the main thing in the Breakfast Club, that all these characters are very strongly stereotypes, and that it's kind of they're all flipped in front of each other and they kind of learn something from each other.
Yeah. Right. And he doesn't quite do that enough in this film. He doesn't undo the stereotypes enough, and he doesn't give us enough content. So yeah, that's why Jake feels like an empty vessel. And then Ted, the geek, whatever we're supposed to call him,
Farmer Ted.
Yeah, he's such a rich character, and we're supposed to not like him. This is my big question about this film, because high school me would have been so in love with exactly that kind of guy. I feel like the guys I had crushes on in high school looked like him, were confident and funny like him, danced like him. Why is she so repulsed by this guy? Is it about reputation, or is it actually the way he looks?
Yeah, I think it is that. It's that he is a geek, and she's totally middle of the road. Aside from that sassy hat, which would put her in the cool category, and she's just middle of the road. She's nothing specific enough to be in any one of, she wouldn't be in any of the Breakfast Club stereotypes. In Pretty in Pink, she's an indie girl. She's into music, she's into fashion, and this, the only thing she's into is complaining.
Yes,
rightfully so in many instances, but she's not enough of those things to be brave enough or cool enough to be into a nerd, or even a bad guy or bad boy. Which, where are the bad boys in this movie? Where is the John Bender of this world? Because that's who I'd be into. But yeah, so the older kids, they're into. By the way, there's that moment where Jake is doing chin-ups, with someone who's supposed to be his high school friend or whatever. That guy is in his 40s. The teenagers in this movie are adults, except for Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall, who are both 15. And
right, how old is little baby John Cusack?
I think he was also a very young teenager. Isn't he just so cute? John Cusack and Joan Cusack are sort of the accidental highlight of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally forgot that he was in it because he's such a minor character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John Cusack was 2 years younger than Anthony Michael Hall.
Wow.
Oh, so he was 13?
Oh, sorry. 2 years older. 2 years older. Sorry.
Okay. So they were both 15. So he was 17. Yeah. And everyone else is a full-grown adult, which makes it look really weird when they're partying, right? So, but that's also the thing where you're like, oh my God, seniors, there must always be partying. And at the parties, there's pizza, and there's pizza everywhere. And it was a crazy party if there's pizza on the record spinner, because that's what crazy parties are, man. It's that's also a cliche of what you imagine things will be like when you're older, I think.
Right. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe people really were partying like that in the 80s and we just missed it.
We missed it.
I was never at one of those parties, that's for sure.
Nope. Me neither.
But I also remember being a freshman and the seniors just looked like full-blown adults. I remember feeling such a divide, because at that point they're still growing, and then they seem to have kind of figured it out, and just being such a difference between the different casts of high school.
Yeah. Yes. And I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I have a thing to say. I think so. This is John Hughes' first movie, and I think that there's this burden to being the first, which is that everything has to be compared to it because it was the first one. Just like let's just watch what happens with our first woman of color vice president.
Mhm.
Everything's going to be compared to it, and it's never going to be able to hold up, and it's never going to be able to be as excellent as it could be because it has to sort of toe the line in certain ways. So it does these kind of radical moves in some ways just by centering a teenage girl, a real actual teenage girl, not like a 25-year-old,
Mhm.
and letting us into her sort of really average, complainy life. But then, yeah, it falls in all these other ways. But then subsequent movies get better and better, and then the whole like industry of teen movies that becomes what the movie industry is about. It's about reaching teens, at least for the 90s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can tell that he has a very specific and strong point of view, and he's insightful, but he's still kind of finding his sea legs.
Yeah.
He's still finding the balance of portraying these characters and a narrative over a feature length.
And there's a lot to like in this movie. There's a lot to like, and I know that there are plenty of people for whom this is not only their favorite John Hughes movie or their favorite Molly Ringwald movie, but it's their favorite movie. And there are a lot of people who are diehard 16 Candles fans and just like, are super into it. And there's a lot that's funny. There's a lot that's cute. There's a lot that's charming. But there's a lot that's really messed up about this movie too. Starting with, it's rated PG. It's rated the same thing as like Frozen, I think.
Yes, yeah.
And it's got full frontal nudity and at least one, if not two, F-bombs within the first 10 minutes.
I totally had forgotten about that, and I was really shocked. It's possible that I watched this on like TNT TV or something. Yeah. And so I missed the those more late night parts.
Yeah. Well, I think that I must have also seen it on TV or had like a recording of it from TV where you don't see her completely naked in the shower. You just taking a shower and understand that the girls are ogling her in the shower. But so like, yeah. So when you see like her entire rack, it's just like, what? It really took me a step back. And even that moment where she's like, they fucking forgot my birthday. I'm like, oh, really? We're doing this?
Well, yeah, we were just talking about, so this predates the PG-13 rating, you know? And so they had that. I mean, like Temple of Doom, we've talked about this, came out the same year. It's the one that inspired the PG-13 rating.
And has way less boobs.
Yeah, but it was this weird thing that keeps popping up in the 80s is, well, it's not rated R, so therefore it must be PG. And so you get, yeah. And so for a movie, yeah, but apparently, but this was definitely aimed for teenagers. And so you have that difficult question of where does it land on that scale? And so because of that, a lot of PG movies during this era are a lot harder than what we would ever see in a PG movie, 10 years later.
So I remembered after I watched this that at the height of the Me Too stuff, right after Harvey Weinstein in 2018, Molly Ringwald actually wrote an article in the New Yorker about watching The Breakfast Club with her 10-year-old daughter.
Yep.
And she right away, she's like, look, 10 is way too young, but my daughter insisted that a lot of her friends had seen it already. And my adult friends were saying that kids will just kind of let the stuff they don't understand, usually the sexual stuff, like sort of wash over them and they won't remember it, which seems true for me when I revisit movies from my childhood. I'm like, oh, damn, that's a sexy movie. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And she was talking about all of the is focusing on this Me Too thing, all of the ways in which this movie is about sexual assault, and 16 Candles really pushes it.
Yes.
He's going to violate, or I could violate her 17 ways, whatever it is that Jake says about his drunk girlfriend. No, that's actually against the law, sir.
Yes. Yeah. And I understand that teenagers are both horny and horrible, but there is so much rape culture in this movie, and it is treated the way that it's funny. It's funny that the hero, this perfect blank man, is like a hero and desirable because he chooses not to date rape his drunk girlfriend, and instead gives the girl to someone else, like hands her off to someone else, and like after tricking her into thinking, like, when they do that weird thing where he's like, "Who's that? That's me. Who are you? I'm him." Like, so she thinks that she's safe, and then he's like, "Have fun."
Right. You know? And it's not even that he's an admirable character because he chooses not to date rape her. It's that he's bored of that. He's already done it enough, and now he's like, this other person seems a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
This person, I think, sparks his interest because he found her sex quiz on the ground. I think that's what is appealing about her to him.
And then he says, like, "I like how she's always looking at me."
Oh God, the narcissism.
Yes, but which is very,
but so like teenage, so teenager.
Yeah.
But I also think, like, part of the message of this movie, which is probably why it meant so much to so many, teenage girls, is like, oh, I'm special, even though I'm not really that special. I somehow, someday, someone is going to look at me and say, you're the one who I choose because you're different than everybody else. And this other girl, even though she seems to have everything you want, she's gross. She doesn't deserve happiness. She likes to drink, and she has boobs. Gross. Get her. Because she likes to drink and party, which I agree, like, it's really shitty of her to like trash his house, which is impressive. It's impressive how they trash the house,
right? And she announces her fantasy, which is really interesting, that they're the rich couple on the block and everybody wants to party at their house. Right? That's what she says. She loves when his parents are out of town because of that.
Yeah. And I think she's nice. Like, she's not, we never see her do that thing, or unless I just completely missed it or deleted it from my brain. But I don't think we ever see her be horrible.
Yeah, she's not a mean girl. She's just popular.
She's not. She specifically isn't mean to Sam or Sam's friend. She just wants to drink, and as we all know, if you're a woman who likes to drink, you in the 80s, everyone is just like, well, you definitely deserve to get taken advantage of and possibly like murdered or something, yeah. It's gross. And I agree with you that when you're a kid and you watch movies that have like problematic stuff, it does sort of wash over you because you don't know what you don't know, right? So I didn't realize that Dirty Dancing was about an abortion until I was an adult. I was like, I really don't get what's going on with Penny, but I guess it's bad. But I think there's enough of this movie to be like, ugh, we probably should have known better.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about the racism?
Let's get into it.
Let's talk about the racism and possibly the only non-white character in a John Hughes movie.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, it's one thing that does carry over into a lot of his movies is his background, which is a very upper class white Chicago background, which he carries over into almost all of his movies. Like you look at any of them and they've got these double-decker houses, really nice cars, and it's seen from their point of view. And they don't have people of color or different cultural identities in any of them, really.
Right. It's that Evanston, Illinois scene, but
Mm-hmm.
there are lots of people of color in Chicago and the suburbs
Mm-hmm.
that just get totally erased, which is really interesting. And the only way that an Asian can exist in this world is as a foreign exchange student.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was also strange. Just the whole setup for that guy was bizarre.
It was. I think it's so crazy that the grandparents wanted to have an exchange student at all, but they basically reveal that he's does the dishes and the laundry and mows their lawn.
Oh my God.
They sort of imported a housekeeper.
Yeah.
Which is a real bummer. And he's referred to as a Chinaman.
Yep. By the little brother.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the other grandparents, they're like, we found your Chinaman. Ew.
Yeah, and we should note that the actor is Japanese and that there's a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so he's often called Chinese. He's a couple times yells bonsai, which is Japanese. Right. And the actor himself is actually using a strong South Korean accent based off of a friend he had. Yeah.
And he only exists in this movie to be a joke. Even as to the girl he hooks up with, who is also a weird jokey stereotype because she's big and sort of jock-ish.
Right.
And it's oh, isn't it funny? He's little and small and Asian, and she's this big beefy American woman. She's gonna ride an exercise bike with him in her lap.
That was so that scene though. If you had to because basically that was a metaphor of teenage sex, to where they're working out together, and it's something that you can't show in good taste back then or now, underage sex, and they're basically working out, and it ends with this big climax, and even with a champagne bottle squirting into the air. Mm-hmm. That was pretty clever.
And that girl is the only, I mean, she's somebody who understands what her desire is, what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
And she's seeking to be sexually satisfied. And I think so many of these teenage girl films and TV shows set us up to think that female sexuality is about pleasing men. It's not about girls pleasing themselves or women pleasing themselves, or being pleased by men. And so that's something that she's actually a character to admire when you watch this now. And I think it's something where we can see some progress in, if you look at some of the media, Pen 15 or however we're supposed to pronounce the name of that show, where there's characters who are struggling with pleasure, but they understand that pleasure is part of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And Molly Ringwald's character does not make clear that pleasure is part of this thing that you have sex for.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost at that age, it's kind of like a gauntlet or a door that you've got to go through. It's like this thing that you've got to jump over. It's like this rite of passage, and you don't fully understand what it is or what it truly means.
Right. Well, virginity is this terrible stain.
Yeah.
They're such little kids. I was a late bloomer, but I still think
yeah, me too. But yeah, one of the things that this movie did do, it's like we were talking earlier today, that this is a good companion piece with the movie we saw beforehand, which was Big, which really kind of put me into what it was like to be a 12-year-old so vividly. And this, watching this movie, I remember the anxiety of being a young man or a young boy just grappling with what does all this mean? You know, I'm like an awkward giraffe who can't seem to get along with other boys, let alone girls. And playing things. Am I supposed to be too forward or not forward enough? Am I never supposed to talk to the girl I like, or am I supposed to talk to her? You know, it's like just kind of learning the new rules, and there not being any role models around to tell you what to do. You know,
Well, and like I think this movie is an example of like a very bad role model in the Anthony Michael Hall character, right? Because it's like you pursue her relentlessly, you never take no for an answer, you like literally jump on her anytime she lets her guard down.
Right.
You know, that's how you get the girl. And that's sort of like a John Hughesian sort of cliche, is that the nerdy guy who will that's the ducky, right? Like the nerdy guy will never give up trying to have you. And eventually he'll be entitled to you, maybe not to you, but to someone.
Right. Eventually the girl is flattered into giving in or pestered into giving in.
Giving it her underwear.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah, that's weird.
Oh, so I read a trivia about this movie that there was a moment in the film where she's having that late night chat with her dad, and he realizes that he forgot her birthday, and she tells him about Jake. There was a moment where he realizes she's not wearing underwear. Like he's like, "Where are your underwear?" And they took it out because it was too creepy. And I'm like,
How would you know?
Yeah, that was my question. And like the legend was that John Hughes' wife was like, "You got to get rid of that. That's super creepy." And it is. But a sea of creepy things to point at that and take it out. Okay, well, there's maybe a few others. A few other creepy things. So speaking of the racism, like they refer to the older sister's fiance as a bohunk. What does that mean? Like, I don't understand what that is.
Well, normally that's just like a. Isn't that, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that just like it's like a positive, like a strapping man, right?
So it's. I think it's a compliment, but maybe it means he's like a little bit vapid.
Yeah, and he doesn't at all strike me as a bohunk.
Here, the internet has answered the question.
Oh, good.
A bohunk is an immigrant from Central or Southeastern Europe, especially a laborer, a rough or uncivilized person.
Yeah.
So like a jarhead, a bro.
I thought it was sort of like a Guido, like he was an oil, like they call him oily at one point. Like I thought they were sort of like he was Italian and therefore greasy. Like I don't know, his parents,
his parents are sort of loud and inappropriate in a kind of ethnic-y way.
Vaguely ethnic that it's enough to let you know that it is not to be desired, but not specific enough to like.
Oh, I think he was pretty clearly Italian.
Okay.
Yeah, especially with the way that his family was portrayed.
Yeah. I also like the thing that has always bothered me about this movie is that like the time to speak up about the date of the wedding being the day after your daughter's 16th birthday isn't on the 16th birthday. It's when you're picking the date. It's like, oh, how's November 16th? Well, that's the day after our other daughter's sweet 16. Well, the church is available. Let's go ahead and book it. Like
details
about that was before. Yeah. And that's just always bothered me. Like, you know, they remembered Harry Potter's birthday and it was the day before a wedding. So
yeah, we've made great strides.
It can be done.
Right.
The whole like sort of mythology around the Sweet 16, I don't really remember my 16th birthday. I don't get why it's such a big deal. I mean, I got a driver's license, and I got a car because we lived in Phoenix and you have to drive everywhere. and it was a used piece of shit. Just so everyone knows, I wasn't like my
It
parents.
wasn't a Rolls Royce.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm not. I don't know why 16 is supposed to be such a big deal.
Yeah, I think it used to be a bigger deal, and maybe it's a bigger deal in like the upper class, you know,
Like the debutante world?
The debutante world. Because I remember hearing about it, but I never knew anyone who had something like that, you know.
There was an MTV reality show about rich people having 16th birthday parties.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
There we go.
I mean, I do remember feeling pressure to do something special and fun for your, sweet 16 or whatever.
Did you?
I don't think I don't think I did anything that was special or fun. But my birthday is New Year's Eve, so
right.
It's rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. If they miss it by a day, then you got to wait till next year.
That's exactly right. Did you guys feel like at the like I remember being a kid and thinking to myself that Anthony Michael Hall and Caroline, the girlfriend, didn't have sex, but thought that they both sort of thought that they had?
It's a total gray area. I think they played it so it could be both ways.
Yeah. And I think when I was younger, I definitely thought like, oh, they didn't have sex, but they both will think that they have.
Right.
Which didn't, like, now that I watch it as an adult, didn't make sense to me because he wasn't drunk, right? Anthony Michael Hall wasn't drunk. So why doesn't he remember?
Right. That is the point. And also, why does he travel with his nighttime headgear?
Yeah, yes, I did appreciate that about him. I was like, you know what? He's really committed to his oral
He's
health.
He's got his day bag. Yeah. Yeah. It's as a writer, it's a tough needle to thread. You know, I feel like by them waking up and him not remembering, because I don't remember him acting drunk, but there was so many beer cans in that car. You've got the plausibility that he was, or you've got that time gap that we don't know what happened afterwards. But by him being the one that doesn't remember, it makes him much less creepy if she's the one who has a little more of an idea on what may or may not have happened. If it was just him that remembers and her, if she, by her being more lucid, then you're kind of playing the plausibility that it was maybe consensual on her part if it did happen, rather than her being just a total blank.
This trope of people not remembering whether they had sex is so common. I don't really see.
No,
I just don't see how that even works. Yeah,
especially because he is so obsessed with the idea of having sex. It consumes his entire world, is this quest to get laid. And like Jake puts a 6-pack in the Rolls Royce with him when he tells him to have fun, but like 6 drinks isn't enough to black out.
It is for me. I'm such a lightweight.
Yeah, and I just thought like if they had had sex, he would have made it a point to remember it. So maybe he was trying to trick her into thinking that they did. I don't know.
I don't think so. I think he was, being about as genuine as he could be. I do think from a storytelling aspect that the thing that he wants he may have done when he wasn't conscious. And I feel like that kind of like it took away his quest,
Right.
And,
because the thing he wants to get rid of is the stain of virginity. It's not about actually having sex. It's about not being a virgin anymore.
Right. And I feel like Molly Ringwald, I feel like the theme for Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall is that they kind of need to chill out. Yeah. That this thing that's so important to them, that they're stressing so much over, that they're creating their own anxiety, it's really not much of a big deal. And you're going to find your quote happiness if you just kind of let go of how things are supposed to happen.
beautiful message.
Yeah. Okay. So, so on a scale of 1 to 10, one candle to 10 candles.
16 is not an option. I'm sorry.
16 candles. How many candles would you rate this movie? And I think that this is a tough one.
Yeah, I almost have to give an asterisk to it, to my rating. But so go ahead.
Yeah, I feel the same way. A lot of these older movies I think about in terms of how excited I am to show my kids these movies when they're big enough. So the greatest thing to happen in 2020 is getting to show my kids Back to the Future.
Yes. It has some problematic elements of its own.
Sure. But that gets the full 16 candles. This one, I don't necessarily care if they see this. I think I'll want them to see Breakfast Club, definitely Ferris Bueller. But this movie, it's almost just like an experimental first try for the director, and what comes later is better.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, I think when I was 15 or 16 myself, I got this wonderful warm feeling when the two of them are sitting around the birthday cake at the end. It's a beautiful shot. And I think it worked for me in that way. But watching it now, there's no content to their relationship at all. What does she see in him besides his good looks? What does he see in her besides she's the opposite of the drunk blonde girl? They don't even spend any time together, and there he is in this like very intimate romantic moment with her at the end. I'm going to go ahead and just in honor of my younger self, I'm going to give it a 7.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
How many candles do you give it, Nathan?
So mine has the asterisk of if you just took like specific moments, like it like scenes and sections, like the quality of some of the characterizations and things like that, I'd probably have to give it like a 6.5. But if you took the thing as a whole with, its problematic sexual moments and racism and all that, then I'd probably have to bump it down to like 5.5.
So I think I'm going to go way lower than you guys, because like Shaina said, the rewatchability and enjoyability of the movies is what I look for when I'm going to give something a high score, like a 10. Raiders, Die Hard, Back to the Future. These are 10s. Because not only are they infinitely rewatchable and enjoyable and somewhat and timeless, that's what I look for at a 10. So I would say that this movie, everything that it has that's good, another movie has better, right? If you want Molly Ringwald, you have, she's better in Pretty in Pink. She's better in Breakfast Club. All of the nerdy character, everything that is good in this movie is better in a different movie, and without the problematic rape culture and or maybe with even just less of the problematic rape culture and racism. So like I give it a 4 because it's I think it is something that you can point to and be like, can you believe this shit? This is what we were serving teenagers in 1984. But I would never go to this movie as a pick or an example of anything in particular, because I would pick something else, right? John Hughes movie, pick something else. Molly Ringwald, pick something else. Anthony Michael Hall, Geeks, 16th birthdays even, pick something else. There's going to be a different, better choice. So
right. I just think a lot of those other films and TV shows owe a lot to the precedent. Mm-hmm. So I think that my score is based on sort of its legacy, because you don't have great shows like Never Have I Ever without 16 Candles.
Yeah.
and what growing up, this was far more, I guess, like relatable. Because it in some ways was more controversial or fearless or like pulling back the curtain of what teenagers actually say and don't and aren't depicted in movies. I remember that in terms of it being on TV, it was much more scary and dangerous than a lot of these other safer, softer movies.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I definitely, but even if you were like gonna pick a movie about how horny teenagers are, I'd pick Valley Girl, or something else. But I completely agree with you. A lot of current pop culture is owed by the influence of John Hughes and 16 Candles for sure. So what would your deep cut recommendation be? If Netflix will recommend things if you watch 16 Candle. Amazon will recommend things, and they're all going to be pretty standard, other John Hughes, Molly Ringwald movies. So what's a slightly more off the beaten track recommendation? If you like 16 Candles, you'll probably also like...
Nathan, you go first.
Okay, so mine is not super deep, but it's definitely like one of my favorite from the teenage experience point of views of recent, which is Lady Bird.
Yeah,
nice.
Saoirse Ronan, Timothy Chalamet as the dreamy boy. But yeah, in terms of just like really strong writing, directing, and a very strong female point of view. It was, like I said, like 16 Candles reminded me what it was like to be a teenager. In terms of the most recent movies, that's what I definitely had that kind of feeling with watching Lady Bird. And yeah, it's just a great script.
Good one. What do you think, Shaina?
I think I kind of already gave it away, which is I think Never Have I Ever is the show to watch. First of all, it's about an Asian family, so it centers an Asian teenage girl. She's Indian in this case, and it doesn't shy away from the specificity of what it means to be South Asian in, I think she's supposed to live in LA. And each character is fully fleshed out and more interesting. And spoiler alert, she ends up with the nerd instead of the hot guy, but she has to go through the like vapid hot guy to get to the nerd. But I think Mindy Kaling, who's the creator of that show, gives she's a big rom-com fan, and she's really influenced by these John Hughes movies, and you can see how that plays out in the show. So it's not such a deep cut, but it's a kind of, here's a way to reverse all the bad things. You reverse the racism, you reverse the Me Too stuff, you make characters fuller and more complex, and the girl ends up with the right guy at the end.
Nice.
Cool.
So I went a completely different way.
That's okay.
The actor who plays Jake Ryan, Michael Schuckling, was only in like 4 or 5 movies ever.
Because Matt Dillon killed him.
Yeah, I think so. I think he was just like, there can be only one, and they had a Highlander situation. But he's in a movie that I really love that's called Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken.
Oh, I know that movie.
Yeah. He is the love interest in that movie, and has way more qualities to be loved than Jake Ryan. So if you're like, yeah, I'm into Jake Ryan, what else? Maybe try Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken. Takes place in the 1920s, and it's about a girl whose job it is to jump a horse off a high dive.
That's Laura Dern, isn't it? I'm remembering that wrong.
Is Reese Witherspoon in that movie?
What am I thinking of? Something else.
I don't know. What are you? Reese Witherspoon being in the 1920s and jumping a horse off a high dive because there's no internet yet?
It's possible.
So Krissy, I have to say, knowing that you are the mother of a teenager,
yep,
who is no, she's not close to 16.
She's 14,
yeah, but it'll happen eventually. I just kind of wanted to know how you are thinking about it in those terms.
So we watched the beginning of this movie together because I really wanted to know what she would think about it. She loves to chime in on how inappropriate things are at
Nice.
all times. She is a very social justice warrior, and she loves to point out things that are problematic. But we didn't get that far into it because after like the first 10 minutes, when I was like, oh, holy shit, maybe this movie is not appropriate. It's rated PG. And I remember watching it when I was her age. And like, I'll let her watch it, but not with me sitting next to her, you know? But I am confident that she will absolutely hate this movie and just really only be able to focus on the things that are problematic about it. And I think that, you know, a lot of movies give you that opportunity to like open the door to conversation of, um, well, why was this acceptable then? And it's not acceptable now. You know, when I'm a gigantic Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and all things Bill and Ted fan. Um, and they use the 3-letter F word in that movie quite a bit. And of course, she hates that and, you know, finds it really disturbing. So we were able to like have a conversation about how words change over time and the offensiveness is kind of based on how people respond to it. So, but I don't think that she would find very much in 16 Candles to discuss.
Yeah, I think there's something reassuring in that. Yeah, I think that we've come a long way for teenage girls. Maybe not far enough, but I think there's just more. We have a bigger vocabulary to talk about their experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and you know things like intersectionality and like various kinds of sexualities. You know, depending, I guess, on where you live, there's that vocabulary is readily available. I'm in San Francisco, everyone,
Yeah.
but there's I think that television and movies are offering us more options for what it
Absolutely.
means to be a teenage girl. So I talked about Pen
Mhm.
15. There's also even Big Mouth.
Oh, Big Mouth for sure.
Um,
That's another one that's like I hope she will watch it, but not with me sitting next to her. Like,
yeah, there you go. Yeah, so there's a lot, and even in the 90s, like we got My So-Called Life,
mm-hmm.
which was amazing,
Mhm.
and also about a redheaded sort of average complainer.
Yep.
Um,
God, I had such a crush on her.
she's amazing. And you know, and there's the nerdy boy and the hot sort of bad guy with the the chin,
Mm-hmm.
and like so it has all of those things,
I love.
and like the parents who just don't understand, um, and the complete lack of I guess Ricky is a person of color, so they did that, and they added so like even then it had made some leaps,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we do sort of owe 16 Candles for letting us look at media about teenage girls and center the experience of I think what's supposed to be an average teenage girl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, even in the visibility of like people in the media having a different experience, like the yesterday the news of Elliot Page coming out as
Yes,
a transgender person like was treated so respectfully, at least by the
Mhm.
people I follow on Twitter. So
right.
I think
Well, there was a lot of celebration around it.
Mhm.
There was some fear too in the announcement that he made, but like, yeah, there's been we've come a long way. It's hard sometimes to remember that because there's
It's true.
a lot of hate in the world too. But we've made strides, and I think that Hollywood sort of guides us as how to think about things like race and gender and sexuality, and it's guiding us in a better direction.
Yep. I completely agree. Um and it is, you know, looking back at these movies, like it's not that long ago. It's not that long ago.
Right.
Um
84 was a lot longer than I would choose to believe. But yeah, in a cultural level, I mean, we can still remember it, so it wasn't that long ago. God, I feel old.
Well, I hope that you guys will call me back on when it's time to talk about 80s sitcoms, because if you didn't notice, I talk a lot about TV. I've turned into more of a TV analyst than a film analyst in recent years. So,
well, there's just so much. It's just so much exciting stuff going on right now in TV. It kind of has taken the vacuum of, the kind of the middle budget features that would be about people, that you just don't have anymore. It looks like Krissy just dropped off of our recording.
How terrible.
So we'll have to wrap up the show ourselves.
I think we can do that. Well, it's
there
nice
we go.
to meet you.
Well, yeah, great to meet you too. Thanks for talking. So this has been the Most Excellent 80s Movie Podcast. We're still recording, so we might as well continue. If she comes on back, we'll record a different ending. But thank you, everyone. This has been Nathan Blackwell. Shaina, thanks again for being our guest. And then Krissy Lenz, who we just lost.
Yep. So we kind of lost internet and audio there at the very tail end of that. Apologies. Of course, nothing works right. Whether it's online or in person, and it's not in person anymore. So just nothing works right. But anyway, we thanks Shaina for being our guest. You can find out all about her on the episode post on mostexcellentpod.com. Thank you so much for listening. And, head into the new year being excellent to each other and, of course, partying on dudes. Thanks.